are you, dude?
Good man, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. Good. We had a bit of a mix up of our time zones, being on the other side of the world to each other. But
Yeah,
we're all good now. We got it all sorted.
that's
Um,
that's what comes along with the international hustle, man. It's all good though.
yeah, it's a good thing about the art community. We're all sort of spread out here, there, and everywhere. Um,
Exactly.
just a quick update on some people who may or may not know you. Currently, senior environment and lighting artist at Toot Games. And previously, you've got some pretty big names on your CV, man. You got like Ubisoft, Relic, Capcom. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I've been all over the place.
been there, done it. Got the t-shirt, the hat, the hoodie, everything. You must have a good lanyard connection. Like you must have had got quite a few of them.
Actually, to be honest, I don't think I have a single one. I got a bunch of like a lot of T-shirts and stuff, like team T-shirts and
Yeah,
game
yeah.
T-shirts. But lanyards, I've never really been to too many conventions, so I think that's those get passed around there. Inches.
And so Tim Simpson, how did it start then? How did you? So I was looking through you, have a quick glance over your LinkedIn, man. Like you're similar to me then. You're a self-taught artist, right?
Exactly.
Saying how
Yeah,
did so?
yeah.
What got you into that? Like, did you just sort of go like, what was that route? Because did you make the act? Was it a sort of self-conscious decision to
Yeah.
self-teach
It's
and you
like
wanted to get into it?
back in high school, the school I was going to, I was like 13 years old at the time. They actually had a kind of a digital communications program, I think it was called. Yeah, it was called DC class. It was the nickname. And there was a lot. You could had the opportunity to learn like Flash or Photoshop, and they also were one of the few high schools in my like area that had access to 3D Studio Max.
Yeah,
So I kind of started jumping in there and dabbling around with that, and I kind of heard that a bunch of like high school graduates were actually getting jobs at like EA Vancouver working on Need for Speed cars
oh,
and stuff like that.
nice.
So I was like, "Oh man, this is a golden goose opportunity. I don't really want to go to college or anything like that, so maybe I'll just bust my ass and get good at this 3D thing and go work
Get
in video
good.
games." Yeah, exactly. Because I'd spent all my time playing video games, and I was into the CG side of things. Like I really like Jurassic Park, and I could see where visual effects and stuff are going, all being done on the computer, right? So this was
Hmm.
around like when I first started dabbling with that. And the teacher I had in that class is his name's Bill Henderson. He actually had a huge impact on my life. He was like really good at seeing potential in students and giving them the opportunity to kind of pick and choose what they wanted to learn. I
Yeah,
kind of went all in on the 3D side of things, and he was always really good at finding other mentors, like maybe people in a couple with us every now and then.
yeah.
This was back like 2001. The internet wasn't as huge as it is now, right? So about like I think back then, and it's like, oh yeah, we had the internet, but there wasn't any crazy resources. So yeah, I mean, yeah, and after high school, I kind of just kept teaching myself. Bill actually he left the high school and created a small studio in Abbotsford. It was like right outside of Vancouver, doing like stuff like 3D printing. And so I went and worked with him for a little bit,
Oh, I
and
see. So
there was
that's
a
where
bunch
that
of
came
like
from.
sort of like an apprenticeship, sort of like work
Yeah.
experience, kind of on the go. In it was all related to CG. So basically, I was working at a call center. I had just graduated high school, so I was working at a call center.
Oh,
It's,
really?
yeah, I dropped in and to see some friends that were working in this small studio at the time,
So in
stopping by and come and do some work here. And so I basically quit my call studio
that is
or call center
such a
job
good
the next
idea.
day. I was like, "Peace, I'm out of here, guys. I'm gonna go work
Do some
and
cool
do some
shit.
3D stuff." Yeah. So so I worked there for a bit, and then kind of moved out on my own, and then yeah, just kept on working on my portfolio consistently whenever I had the chance, and in my parents' basement, evenings and weekends, and whenever I
I
wasn't
don't blame you. It seems like it's a
working.
route like a lot of people take is the whole work a normal job and quote normal job and work on this on the side and keep it
Yeah, I
developing and
mean,
developing and developing. It's like it's not really it's not atypical. Like most industries there tends to be like a
exactly.
training route.
Like, I mean, it's if you're going the self-taught route, you're probably going to need some way to sustain yourself. And so this was after things wrapped up with like Bill in his studio. I had kind of moved out on my own across the country, then moved back. So I was back at my parents' house, basically just yeah, working when I was across the country, I was working a 9 to 5 all my time and for very little pay, and I was having very little hours on the side to work on my 3D stuff.
Yeah.
So I said, screw it, I'm gonna move back home. I managed to save up a stack some cash while I was working. And that gave me a bit of leeway to when I moved back home because my my dad was like, "Well, you're still gonna pay some rent and stuff like that." So I had to manage my finances, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that is a thing. I think a lot of people like, "Oh, I want to get good at 3D, but I don't, I might have to get a job, and that's gonna take up all my time." And it's like, yeah, sometimes you got to work. Maybe go work at like McDonald's or Subway and pay
Yeah.
the
No.
bills.
Yeah.
But
hundred
then
percent.
in your spare time, just go hard on the 3D stuff, right? Like you don't have to sit there and play video games every night, or you don't watch Netflix or
And
whatever. It's like
that is a big thing for it, isn't it? Like, because I think a lot of people don't understand. Like, when you do that route, is you are literally having to finish your job, your day job, get home, feed yourself, do whatever you need to do, and then it's onto the grind of doing your 3D work. And it's like, okay, it is a bit of an
exactly.
investment. Like, it isn't an easy route, but I mean,
I mean, but then again, paying like 20 grand to go to art
exactly,
school,
exactly.
that's another bullet to bite, right? So it's if you're going the self-taught route, you definitely need to work on self-discipline of when you get home, getting to work. That is a big thing because I mean, it's easy to be like, well, I've had a hard day. I'd rather
Yeah,
go and shoot some guys in Call of Duty and stuff like that. But you just have to have that end goal of like, I want to get out of this crap job
yeah,
and get into the industry. So I'm gonna I might not even want to make art tonight, but I know by forcing myself to do it, I'm going to build up the habits and the consistency, and that's what's going to carry me through to getting the job. And I'm going to need those skills anyways, that consistency and those good habits when I'm working in the industry. As well, develop them as
yeah.
early as
It's almost
possible,
like
right?
you don't sort of go off emotions, or like it's all about for me it's all about principle. It's like, because if you go how you feel, like, like you said, you'll come home some days and go, I don't really feel like doing work. But if your principles are, I do an extra an hour every night, your principles don't change, your feelings do. So like, I completely agree, that is a really important skill. Just out of curiosity, you mentioned, your high school, when you were growing up, like, had access to 3ds Max and stuff like that. Would you say Canada or North America has a bit more support for that side of technology? So, for example, in England, in, we call it secondary schools, that in your sort of normal school career, you don't really get access to that type of software, or any exposure, in fact, to any 3D stuff whatsoever. It's only if you sort
Yeah,
of go
it
A
was
level.
pretty special case. There was a couple high schools that had access to it, but I think the one that I kind of lucked out, and the one that I went to started to have this reputation of like they would go to the big competition called Skills Canada, and they would consistently win in the animation categories.
Oh,
So
nice.
they kind of dumped more resources, and they're like, okay, you're making us the school board look good. Yeah, there was a few, but I mean, it's not super common. I have no like now, but I mean, there's so much free software and stuff like that
Yeah.
that it's just so widely accessible across the board. Sometimes it's what you do outside of the educational system that actually set you up for success, anyways. So if you think about relying on high school to set you up for success in life, you're
Barking up the wrong
no,
tree.
the nose of the plane is already pointed down, and you're going at like 1,000 miles an hour towards the earth if you're going to rely on that. So
Yeah. What So you mentioned you played a bit of games. Was it like, one sort of two-part question? So like, what sort of games was it you sort of played that inspired you to get into the industry, or was it not even like that? Was it like, I noticed that I could potentially make a career out of this, and it just so happens you also liked games, or was there a particular type of game which sort of went, God, I'd love to have worked on that, and inspired you to
for
work onto it?
like I kind of first started getting into it like when I used to play Counter Strike a lot, and then
Nice.
opening up the Hammer editor and making kind of like just little quick deathmatch levels was kind of like my first where it kind of clicked of like, oh, you can actually make things for and stuff like that. But then a big one for me was actually the very first God of War game. I was actually
So
working at
good.
EB Games at the time.
Yeah.
I didn't really know what it was. I'd never seen anything from E3 for it, or hadn't read anything in the magazines back then about it, and so I was like, kind of like, I think I'd maybe seen one or two screenshots, but I thought it was this cartoony kind of like game, and then I was like, oh, someone threw it on in the demo unit, EB games like after as we were closing up the store and the first like 10 minutes of that Hydra battle, I was like, holy shit, this is
Yeah.
super violent and amazing. Like I was instantly in love. So I mean that was a big one for me just because like how good it looked at the time and like the epic action and adventure. That really was like I'd love to work on a game like this. Like I'd always liked things like, Indiana Jones, the kind of like ancient. So that was like it instantly kind of hooked me. I always like the Greek mythology, and so I was like, wow, this is super cool. And I saw the potential for what games could.
Yeah,
The
I know what
first
you mean.
even Metal Gear Solid, like on the PlayStation One, that was like
Favorite.
super cinematic and really cool. I was like, oh, I could kind of see the potential of where the industry was going, and those two were big ones, like Metal Gear Solid and
So touching on Metal Gear, so it's a question I like to ask people because I think everyone gets very different answers. Is what games do you see like as has influenced the industry the most? Like, because there's been certain points in the industry where a game's come out and it's just changed the whole landscape of what other developers are trying to do. So, like I said to
yeah,
Ben last week, was for me it's Metal Gear, Metal Gear One on the PS1. Suddenly, games were becoming a storytelling medium and a cinematic experience. So, from like your perspective, is there any games which stand out to you, which you're like they really changed the industry in your sort of gaming lifetime?
yeah. I mean, definitely the first Metal Gear Solid because that was one of the first really cinematic story-driven games out there. I don't know, man. Like thinking back to it over the years, I mean, everything Naughty Dog's put out has always kind of like upped the bar in terms of
Yeah, yeah,
art and storytelling. Like the Uncharted game, when that series first came out, it was kind of like this fun action adventure series. Then Last of Us to instead of just shoot everything, like there was up and down moments, and then if the intro of the game, my friend was sitting there, that almost made me cry. Like this is so emotional. So I mean, storytelling's definitely evolved in games, but also the structure of games nowadays. Like if you think about how Fortnite has drastically sent shockwaves through the industry, right?
yeah, yeah.
I was trying to go to at bat for that free to play cash, and I think like Apex is definitely succeeding in those terms.
It's funny how they take each other and they move on from each other. So it's like you had H1Z1 doing the battle. Well, sorry, probably correction. Minecraft and the DayZ mod doing the battle royale thing, and like each person's like changed it a little bit more. So you had
That
PUBG.
tweaks it a bit, makes it a bit more like accessible.
Yeah,
And then you have the whole other side of the equation nowadays is like streamers on Twitch, right? So it's like if you can get your game
yes, yes,
resonate with that community, a sleeper hit can like take off overnight. Like when you look at like Fortnite when it first came out, it didn't even have the battle royale stuff in it, right? They saw probably the success of I would say like PUBG or something like that, and hey, we could probably implement a mode like this. Let's experiment. And then I would assume that it just started like gathering momentum on Twitch because it was so much more accessible, less janky, and from there it just kind of like everyone's on Twitch, everyone's watching these games, especially younger
yeah.
people. I mean, that's like to be honest, if I was marketing a game as a marketer these days, I wouldn't even think about doing a television commercial.
No, no, I
I
don't
would
think they
take
do.
all of that marketing money.
Yeah.
I still see like TV commercials for big games, and I'm like, that's
Do
probably
you?
a couple million
Actually, I don't
dollars.
watch much TV to be fair.
Exactly,
No,
you're proving my point, right?
yeah,
Exactly. It's just like, what's a TV commercial? And most of your target audiences, they're either on Twitch or they're watching, like like influence.
yeah,
I would take that entire marketing budget and just be like, here we go. Let's put it in these two mediums and maybe a bit of Facebook ads, and
but
then that's
at the time of
that's
Battlefield
how
was
it is.
released, I thought that like because I watch a lot of YouTube. There's a lot of YouTube content creators I like to watch. Like the likes of Jack Frags and Matimio and Level Cap and these guys. And it's like you can just see when the marketing guys that say EA have just gone right. We're going to do a push now. And you see all these guys suddenly come out with 2, 3 Battlefield videos. And you can clearly see there's a marketing team working behind there. Same for the streamers doing the exact same. So yeah, I do think that is the way marketing is going. Like you said, I've just proved your point. Like I said, I don't even watch TV anymore.
Like, what's
Um,
a TV commercial? I don't know.
I,
The only time I ever see them is when I'm sitting like in the cinema,
yeah,
maybe five
yeah.
minutes before the movie, and even then I'm looking at my phone like,
Mhm.
like stop advertising to me, Coca-Cola. Like I don't
Yeah.
want I don't want your corporate shill, man.
uh, I won't lie, I'm kind of not salty about Fortnite. So the original Fortnite, I was a very big fan of. I really loved that game. It was like a tower defense game against these really cool like zombies, which were like, the skins were the sort of hoods and clothes, and I really loved it. And when I saw them doing the battle royale thing, I was really like against it. To be honest, I was like, "Oh, you're just jumping on the bandwagon. You have a really cool idea here. I'll stick with it." And I'll be honest, I got proven wrong by a lot of my friends because I said to my friends like, "It won't do well. PUBG will do better. It'll bomb." And I'm eating some humble pie because I was completely wrong. I'm still unhappy about it because I wish they carried on developing the original Fortnite, but more power to them.
I mean,
It
like
worked out
if
for them.
it's something that's gonna, vastly boost the revenue for your studio, I mean, that's everyone wants to survive at their job, right? So I mean, I think that actually what happened in the situation with Fortnite is a great example of like a really fast, agile pivot to like
Yeah,
go with where the market's going. And I mean, it is like even as developers or gamers, it's easy to sit there and have like your niche of like, oh man, I love these puzzle games, like, but they only sell like a
yeah, barely
fraction
anything.
of the mainstream stuff, right? So I mean, the market kind of is the market, and it determines what's going to really take off. So I mean, it's if you're trying to really grow as a company, like I can see the
Yeah,
that.
makes sense. It does
But
make 100% sense. Like, and also I was wrong. Like, God, thank God I'm not in charge of Epic because I was saying, yeah, you should have carried on with the original. And you look at what Fortnite is now.
but
Yeah,
I definitely think like you do have to the quality has to be there, right? Like everything in Fortnite functions and feels good. They had the whole building element, which is kind of different from PUBG. There have been a ton of like say copycats that are like jumping on the bandwagon, but I think they were chasing the trend without investing in the quality of the game. So I mean that's where it's going to be swing or miss, right? So you might jump on the bandwagon, catch a trend, and be super successful. Right, elements behind it, like a strong dev team,
yeah.
a really strong core vision, is probably going to just that's when people are like, oh man, look at they're just hopping on the bandwagon. You have to have something there after that initial grabbing people's interest, right?
I mean, it blows my mind though because I do see the when I sort of read through, and I shouldn't read comment sections because they are their own particular
Oh,
little world.
the worst,
But
man.
they're like, oh yeah, on story games are dead, story games are dead, and I'm like, I mean, some of the games you've worked on, Far Cry 4, Watch Dogs, like brilliant games, and there's other ones like the new God of War, Last of
Insanely good.
Us, and I'm like,
Yeah,
where are you getting these ideas from that multiplayer games of the future and story games can't survive? I mean, God of War and Horizon Zero Dawn, for example, like
I was just talking about this to a buddy at lunch today, actually. I was saying it's like you have it's these days it seems like you either have the mass market multiplayer games or a really insanely high budget AAA experience like God of War or Uncharted or the new Spider-Man game. Give
is
those a
amazing
year
too.
that really stand out, and then everything else in the middle is like there's no attention on it.
Yeah, I mean,
So it's
I miss the PlayStation days. Like on PS2, I used to be able to like go to my local like cash converter and pick up these random PlayStation 2 games, which
yeah, exactly. You
would
could
entertain
dabble,
me
right?
for yeah. But now you don't really have room to do that. I mean, you have the indies, but they always seem to be now betas and
Early access,
pre-alphas.
or they're
Yeah,
really like like a smaller scale. But like I think yeah, that middle ground is getting eaten up just because the costs of and like the time that it takes are so drastically they've gone up so much, right? Like the time it takes to make an asset these days versus what you could pump out on the PS2 is dramatically different. So I think that's where that middle ground's getting eaten up because it's such an investment. It's either like we can put something together and get it out really quickly, small in scope and small in scale, and the people that do that really well, they can crush it, right? Like and if they're all make it, play to their strengths, maybe they're not doing high poly for anything. They're just developing with their own unique art style, and
yeah,
knock that out. And that'll, it doesn't have to sell 17 million units to be like to
cover your
be even
costs, sort
because
of
the
thing.
the
Yeah,
budget wasn't like $50 million. But then you have games like God of War and Spider Man where they kind of the studio goes silent for a few years and then they put out this amazing product and it sells gangbusters. But then I think there's no more studios that are just kind of sort of working on that AAA game that doesn't get a lot of coverage, and then it comes out and it can kind of help the studio survive. Like I don't see that a lot anymore.
oh no, I
It's like
don't either. So it,
It's just
it's weird though, because you do
dramatically
get
shifted.
focus. Is the only good thing I say for it is you do. I suppose you get focus on both sides. Then I suppose the AAA games, when they do it, they know they've got to do it properly and they can't half-ass it. And the multiplayer side of it, it means they have to be, like you said, very agile, quick on their feet, and move with the market. So like, I suppose there's positives and negatives. Like it's obviously, you don't get
I
the
mean, you look at
middle
like
ground.
like Black Ops 4. They just dropped the campaign that last year. They had a multiplayer suite, and I don't think it really hurt their sales. People are like, "Oh man, I love the campaign," and I love the campaigns of Call of Duties. But like, if they can adapt to the current market and be like, if they can look, because when when you put out a game, like you can look at all the back end data, like you can see how many people completed the storyline, and if they're like, "Wow, only 10%," like these are just numbers off the top of my head. This isn't anything I've
Yeah,
heard or
yeah,
anything like that. But like, if you were to be developing that game and you're like, only 10% of the people are getting to the end of the campaign, and only like 30% are even opening it, like, why would we allocate, 30 to 50% of our budget
yeah. No, I
and
agree.
just improve the core experience for like 90% of our audience? So it's just the data is so much what more widely available nowadays too,
Yeah,
right? Like you can see, oh, X amount of people got this one trophy. Like it's crazy. So it's just interpreting data, and a lot of people be like, oh, that's so corporate. But I mean,
it's the way it is. It's
at
the
the
way
end
the
of the
world
day, a
works.
game studio is a business, right? Like, so you
Yeah,
can't get too romantic about it. It's money, then you can't continue making games. So it's finding that right sweet spot of something you're super passionate and really want to put out, and something that's actually going to sell and allow you to keep
yeah,
making
yeah.
games, right?
So we touched briefly on it about time. Do you just curiosity how you manage it? Do you get the chance to play much games these days, or like do you tend to find yourself doing? Because you're doing a lot recently. You're doing the art
Man,
station stuff, the tutorial for UE4 I just saw go up. Like, do you find yourself having much time to even play games these days?
I sneak it in from time to time these days. And then every now and then, like after the ArtStation Challenge wrapped up, I was working on that every day and putting out a video like every week. After that wrapped up, I kind of took a chill like month and a half. I was like, you know what, I got to think of new topics to do. I actually want to play some games, so I finally picked up Red Dead and started playing that.
Oof, not a bad one to
And
pick up.
hell of a time sink. So there was a reason why I didn't buy it during the ArtStation Challenge, because I was like, there's gonna go my time, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So but now I'm trying to ramp back up and keep building the whole Polygon Academy brand and tutorials and stuff like that. So my focus is now more on that. So I still sneak in gaming like maybe 1 or 2 nights a week. If you're hanging out, we'll sit down and play some games and watch a movie or something. But
yeah.
yeah, just organizing my time where it's like these days I want to film a video, back end content for making a tutorial or something like that.
Where
But
did they
yeah,
come
it's
from? The polygonic. So for me, like the Isolation Challenge came up, and I saw a bit of backstory. You're actually one of the reasons I ended up staying in the industry, because I remember I messaged you about 3 4 years ago.
yeah, I
You
dude, I
liked
remember
you
that.
liked
Yeah, yeah.
one of my pieces, and I was like, holy shit, he's a senior environment artist. Oh, I'm gonna, yeah, thank you, fanboying out. And you took some time to really give me some good crit, and it helped me get sort of my sights set on what I needed to do. And just to sum up like how nice a guy Tim is, you then messaged me back like I think it's about 3 4 months ago, and you're like, oh dude, I remember you. I messaged you a while back, and you've actually done some good work, like good job. And I was like, that meant so much because like you didn't need to do that. You did that at your own time. You didn't need to say that, and it says a lot for you as a person.
It kind of also like I've talked about this in the past in some of my videos, where it's like, because I was following you on ArtStation, and it just pinged my notifications, and I took a look, and then I took a look at your portfolio again. I was like, holy shit, this guy's gotten dramatically like there's like a zero to hero here in like what seems like overnight. So it was just like, because you were posting and because we were both using ArtStation for our portfolios and interacting in that ecosystem, it was just another like attention jab, right? So it grabbed my attention, and I looked at your stuff, and it was just like, oh wow, holy smokes, I remember, because you still had some of your older work, and I was like,
Yeah,
oh
yeah,
dude, I remember giving this guy feedback. And then I saw you were working, and so I figured, yeah, I'd send you a message. And it's basically my whole thesis just put into action, like an organic thing that just will happen over time, right? Like
yeah.
you'll come across people's work that you maybe they got your attention in the past, and then you haven't seen anything from them in like a year or two, and then, oh wow, this person's work is a lot better. Like and then maybe if I was a studio looking to hire, that would be an opportunity to reach out. So
You, you
that's my like kind of my whole thesis, right? And I've said it over and over again. That's exactly why your portfolio needs to be on ArtStation and not like
hidden
if
away.
you had some Wix website like www dot alexsart.com and
Yeah, yeah.
it was somewhere and you posted all this new work, I wouldn't have never you've even known, right? Like
Well, to be
so,
fair, without our station, literally it's been such a snowball effect. So I started my first big industry job. All the guys there were like, "Why are you? What your portfolio's on this? Like, I think I was using a site called Carbamade." And then I'm like, "Get on our station." I was like, "Okay, I'll do that." And then I came across the likes of you. I then came across like Ben Wilson. Came across then Jeremy's YouTube channel. Then it snowballed into this crazy thing where I've met the Discord. It's just blown out of control, and it's all because like I don't want to put it all down to our station, but it played a huge part. Um,
it's just the social media game that you got to play in like 2019. Like you need to be posting your work on ArtStation, LinkedIn, ideally making YouTube content, stuff like that. Like do on those platforms, the more chances people have of finding you organically. And I mean, if the days of going to say like an art college and building your own personal portfolio site and then sending applications to game studios like shotgun blasting them,
yeah,
I think your chances of success doing that versus consistently building up, a following on ArtStation, Instagram, YouTube, just by documenting what you're making, right? Like do blog posts about what you're making, post your final artwork, just little content jabs on Instagram. You can post like 3 or 4 things for a single project, right? Oh, here's the materials, here's a breakdown, here's a fly through video. That's like 5 pieces of content for Instagram, which is only going to help you grow your following on there. And then you can funnel people from Instagram to your ArtStation or, or LinkedIn to your ArtStation or vice versa or whatever, right? So
yeah. Well, we
it's
had this
just getting
conversation.
people to see your work.
Yeah, we had this exact. I had this exact conversation with somebody. She was asking me about like becoming more prominent online, as an artist and getting known within the community. And we were talking about, what's the things you could do. And I was like, and to be honest, you've sort of hit one side of it, which is, being a resource within the community. So posting tutorials and being helpful to people. That's an incredible way to grow your sort of your value within the community, like the Alsatian community. If you don't mind me saying, you you suddenly became very visible within that community because of the blog posts you're doing. And by the way, you should have came first in the Alsatian challenge. In my bit, I saw you got. I thought you got first, and I checked, and you got second, and I was like, what? Seriously?
Thanks, man.
I couldn't believe it, man. But this is funny. Like, so you seem to gravitate quite naturally towards the sort of mentorship role. I think it's probably the best way to describe it. So, for example, you naturally were very helpful for me as an artist. The YouTube series you do, that was very much of a mentorship type thing. Do you also? I'm just curious. As a senior, do you gravitate towards that type of work within your day job as well? You find
For
yourself
sure.
mentoring?
Yeah, I mean, anytime there's an opportunity for feedback or showing someone a new technique or something like that, it's definitely you know actively it's after, which is it's only going to help people grow. The studio is going to become a better place, and the end product will hopefully be better for it, right? Which is, if the game does well, then it's better for me. It's just like this win-win kind of cycle that you can kind
Yeah.
of
I mean, you took
like
quite
you
naturally
said
to it.
for the ArtStation challenge. Like before that, I was kind of casually posting on ArtStation whenever. But that was only a 1 month period of time, and you can see that it didn't take that much extra effort to make like a video or a blog post or really just document my work in progress. Like, yeah, one extra night a week for a month of exertion, and it
Yeah.
like I said, doubled my ArtStation following. And it's like, so if you do just those kind of like hardcore like a couple times a year, man, like the opportunity it creates for you is had I think 3 job offers on the table at once. And like that's not to sit here and be
Damn.
like, oh, I'm so great. But it's like
No,
that's
no,
just the
no, no.
reality, right? It's like because my work was hitting all these LinkedIn feeds, like recruiters were just like, oh, cool, send him a message. Boom, 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 boom. It's just you're creating opportunity for yourself.
Yeah.
And by giving value to others. So I mean that would be my number one piece of advice for growing an ArtStation following is like give value. That can be either in terms of entertainment value, like by posting just dope art, documenting things, leaving meaningful comments on people's work that aren't just like, oh, that's amazing. You can be
Yeah, I
like,
do
oh, I
find
really like the
that's a big
material.
thing with the
How did you
community.
do this?
Exactly
Just find
that.
find ways to give value, and it's that term is so broad, but it can be literally something as spending 30 seconds to leave a meaningful comment on. For me, when I was starting to focus on, okay, I want to get more of the Polygon Academy mentorship kind of stuff growing. Like that's my target audience is students who want to get into the game industry, right? I would just search for 3D students on ArtStation and just go start leaving feedback and following them,
Yeah.
and they would in turn like turn around and follow me back on ArtStation and then send me messages, and it's just starting to build that relationship, right? And it's gotten pretty crazy. Like I probably get messages a day, 5 to 10 messages a day on various different platforms like ArtStation or YouTube. Oh, hey, can you look at my portfolio? Hey, how would I do this? And so it's getting to the point where I actually don't have time to reply to everyone. So if you're listening and you send me a message and I don't reply, like don't take it personally. It's just there's the time in the day is getting really eaten up.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you
One-off
mean.
thing for sure. I'm happy to do it, and I try and do it as much as possible because like I said, when I was a kid, uh, Bill, he was like a really good mentor to me, and he always put me in contact with the right person. So even if I can't take the time to, give you or whatever, I'll probably be able to be, oh, check this YouTube video, and that's part of the reason why I'm doing the Polygon Academy videos is because instead of writing the same things over and over, like people would send me messages, how did you get into the game industry? And now I can just like, here you go. Here's a YouTube video, like the last one I just put out, right? So it's
Yeah, yeah. It's
optimizing my time.
I mean, I have to admit, being one of the people who you did do that to, you took the time to give some very, like you said, meaningful feedback. Um, it does make the world of difference, especially like at the time I was like, holy shit, he's a senior environment artist at Ubisoft. This is crazy. Oh, and when you're starting out, it does really give. It's what makes you go, okay, maybe I can do this. If this person thinks I'm worth the time of day to talk to,
For
then
sure. I mean,
maybe I'll
that's what
carry
I
on.
had back when I was starting too, right? Like people from in the industry when I was like 17 years old, taking a look at my work, even places like Polycount, like you'll have like seniors and art directors from the industry commenting on your work. Sometimes they have it in their signature, so you know who they are. Sometimes they don't. It's just a random person. But like I said, you never know who's looking at your work, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
definitely put the wind in your sails. So like I still try and reply to every comment and every message, even if it's like, oh, here I'll try and get back to you when I have a second, and then do a maybe even a week later do a big pass where I quickly send off some feedback to 10 people. But it's getting quite intense. But I mean, it shows that it's really rewarding too, right? So
Yeah. Well, I think like you said, like doing all this extra stuff, and like it's great. It's great advice for anybody looking to sort of get themselves out there and put themselves in the shop window, so to speak. Like for you as a person, it's like, okay, I'm doing my 9 to 5, which is your environment art, which is great. And then it's like, oh, in my own time, I'm also taking the time to make this content for people. And from, like I said, you had like X amount of job offers on the table at once. It's no wonder because the recruiter and the company look in and go, damn, this guy has got all these skills, time management, dedication, a passion for the industry, like that compared to the person who's just a dope artist who finishes his 9 to 5 and then that's it, I'll go play games. It's worlds apart just because you took that extra effort to do this sort of stuff. I think it makes a massive, massive difference.
and I mean, like I said, it wasn't that actually that much extra work. It's what's his name? Gary V has a saying where he's always saying, uh, "Document, don't create." And I kind of put my own spin on it, where it's like document what you're creating.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like I was making that scene anyways, right? So just film some stuff, make a time lapse. And at first, yeah, that stuff took me a long time. It took me 6 hours or 7 hours to edit my first video. But by the end of the challenge, I got that down to like a 2 hour thing. Add the music. Okay, here's a time lapse. Pop, pop, pop. Like cut between cameras, and I had gotten that process down, right? So it's just like when I was learning 3D in the beginning. I was like, how do you model a person? It's super complicated, and it would take me forever. Or how do you model an environment? And over the years of doing it, just by doing it, you get faster at it, right? So it's the more you do things, the more you just get faster at whatever it is you're doing.
I mean, to be fair, when that first video dropped, I'm looking at it now, the episode 1, the creating art environments planning. The production value was great on it. Like you hit the ground running with that. Like like you said, the cuts between the cameras and
I
the
think that's
transitions.
come from like just watching a lot of high end YouTube comment like or YouTube content, like like Casey Neistat or Peter McKinnon and stuff like that. Just
Yeah,
seeing
yeah.
the difference between that and like some dude in their basement just recording their just their screen and like the echoey mic, and they're like, "All right, today we will be modeling car, and this is how you." And
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
those tutorials, you can find good like value in them, but it's like they're usually like an hour and a half long, and it's like, "Oh, where did I put this file now?" And it's like, "Oh, come on, man!" Like people's attention span. It's the Instagram generation. Like
Yeah, yeah.
scrolling through your feed. If you don't grab attention within like 10 seconds, you're done. So I mean, that's
I
why I
mean,
figured, okay, I have to edit it and get it down as short as possible. And I'm still really bad. Like my video should probably be 10 minutes long, but
well, to be fair, I think you've got a nice balance because the tips you're giving are they're sort of high level advice tips. They're
yeah,
not like, okay, press this button and then move our polygon to there, then press this button, then change this
actually,
number to
I
this.
think that's because that's kind of how I was taught too. Is like you can make the chess set tutorial from the 3ds Max book, or you can kind of take the ideas of like this is how you model something with a spline and make your own. That's a way better way of actively learning, right? Is like, okay, here's the high level idea. You don't need to, unless you're an absolute beginner, of like, where's the chamfer button? But like, you can find that super easily. Like, there's a ton of content out there, and that's what a lot of content, like the dude in his basement recording his screen is. Move this vertice to 0.03. It's like, who's got the,
So,
you
well,
know,
you're not learning from
it's
that at
you're
the end
not
of the
learning
day.
from that. You're becoming a photocopier, right? So I'd rather
Yeah,
be like, okay, this is why you would chamfer something here. And I'm about to do a tutorial on using trim sheets, which is like an industry standard environment technique that not a lot of people in school seem to be learning. Like some schools teach it, some schools don't, but everyone's always like, what's the trim sheet? Be like, okay, this is how you strip map UVs, and I'll show one or two examples, but I'm not going to sit there and model something and be like, now strip map this part, now
yeah,
strip map
yeah,
this
yeah.
part. Now it's just like, no, here's what you can do with trims. Now go make something with it. So
Do you
I think that the high level stuff is always the best way to learn.
yeah, and I think also just to sort of add on to that, anybody who hasn't gone and watched a Gary Vee video, please go watch one because I think every single artist, especially if you go the route which say me and you have, which is self-taught, all that sort of stuff. If you ever think you don't have time, that guy will put stuff in perspective and like give you a bit of a dose of reality. So go watch his videos as well, like because they
Yeah,
are so
he's pretty
good.
polarizing. Some people love him, some people hate him. But
Uh,
his like a lot of people often interpret his message of like you have to be working all the time. He's like, no, do what
no, I don't think
you
he.
do.
Nah, I think he don't.
Like
He doesn't ever come across like that. I think people who he polarizes are people who don't like some hard
during,
truths.
yeah, or hard truths, or yeah. But it's
Well,
like, yeah, if you enjoy that, actually, that's a big point I kind of wanted to address. Is a lot of people think they want to get into the game industry, but if they spend 90% of their time playing video games, maybe they actually should be devoting that like 2 or 3 year window of developing a skill set to building an audience on Twitch or YouTube. There's like
yeah,
that's now a completely viable career option, right? Like if you're going to spend 4 years getting good at don't actually enjoy it, you just kind of be like, I want to work in a game studio and it's a decent paying job. You can probably take 4 years and build an audience on Twitch, like learn about social media marketing. You can probably make a lot more than you would in game dev.
yeah.
So like I always joked with my mom about that. I'm like, people get paid like thousands of dollars an hour to play like video games on Twitch. She's like, oh yeah, that wasn't like that back in the day. But thankfully, like that's a big thing too. My parents are always, some parents I guess out there would you would tell them, I'm not going to university, I'm not going to college, I'm going to teach myself, and I'm going to industry when you're 16, 17 years old. They'd be like, are you out of your mind? Of course you're going to college. You got to become a doctor if you want to be
Yeah, yeah,
successful.
yeah.
But like the landscape of the market of like the job market these days is there's a lot of self-made people out there now. And just thankfully my parents were always like my mom's an artist, and my dad was always of the mindset of like, no, you like know what you want to do, like go after it and we'll support you.
Do
And
you?
we're not going to say you do, it's like you do you, and like yeah, you have to manage your own finances and stuff. We're not going to pay for anything for you, but like if this is what you want to do and it's going to make you happy, go after it. So I'm just super grateful for my parents for being really
I think
on that front.
so. I think you do. If something a lot of people forget as well is they come out of university or they're sort of at that entry level of wanting to get into the games industry, and they sort of almost say it's the games industry or nothing. So like for example, I started out UI design for mobile apps, and it's like all I wanted to do was something creative. It's like I will get there eventually, but as long as the job's creative, I'm good. And like yourself, you said yourself, you're doing like 3D
Exactly. Like,
printing. Like you
yeah,
just got to
3D
get you
printing came out of nowhere, right? So
exactly. But you develop skills from that sort of stuff as well. Like so, like before I got into like a creative domain, I was a labourer. Like I was a brickie, and it's just like you still develops. Like looking back at the time, I was I didn't see much into it, but like I look back now and I was like, well, yeah, that probably grilled into me a lot of work ethic, early mornings, getting used to that sort of thing. A
like
lot of
that
that probably
structural
came from
design.
yeah, yeah, maybe that too.
But I mean, yeah, it's like a lot of the things you pick up, you can use them in different ways. So like for example, if you're developing yourself in art school and you're having a hard time getting into the game industry, or you're still developing your skill set, you can take what you're making and maybe make like asset packs for the Unreal Marketplace or Unity Marketplace.
Yeah,
And if
yeah,
you do that consistently, as well as learning like actual, so let's say you learn how to do Facebook ads or YouTube ads, to the point where you can actually master social media marketing, you could be making a full time for the Unreal Marketplace before you even get into the game industry. I mean, like, look at, I always use him as an example, but like Jonas Ronegard and
I was
his like
just about to mention him. Yeah, that's
like he's like working for himself now, right? He's like just working for himself, creating value for the community, all these awesome products, and just yeah, he just created opportunity for himself. And because of the internet, you can now, there's so many avenues for revenue and income from 3D that you don't have to just, like you said, it's no, I could become a full-time asset artist for the Unity store if I could figure out like kind of like the algorithm and the marketing side of things.
yeah, yeah.
That's developing that other whole other skill set. So
I think
it's
he's hit a nail on the head as well in terms of tapping into like he knows what he's good at, he knows what he needs, and he's tapped into like for example the substance designer community, people like Ben Wilson and Rico. Like he's really tapped into them guys and leveraged them, and now he's it's really interesting because when we're talking about ways to develop yourself, like we mentioned your route, which is the educate people. You've got the content creator route where you just churn out some great dope work, but then you've got this other route which I think has only really emerged the past like 3-4 years, maybe even
absolutely
like since ArtStation really blew up. It's like, oh, I can actually just
pretty
create
much the
stuff that
whole
people
social
use.
media generation. Yeah, yeah, create value and tutorials and teaching stuff for people.
You got Decagon as
Yeah,
well. Like
get it out there.
Decagon's really cool. Like if you're into level design and all that sort of stuff, the Decagon guys have really done well to like you see their content all over ArtStation.
All over the place. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And it's, I mean, that's building a brand and an audience. Like both the Deco guys and Jonas is like, he now has access to other artists to collaborate with,
yeah,
right? Because he's built an audience. He's built like a, this big following. So now you can have access to people that with you because there's this win-win value exchange, right? It's like, oh, we can collaborate on a tutorial. I'll blast it out to like 50,000 people. We'll have a revenue split or something like that, and it's more attractive to them than just someone coming up to them and saying like, hey, if do you want to make a tutorial and I'll market it for you, but I have no audience.
yeah, yeah. It's
There's,
great. It's great seeing like the outcome of that though. Like so, for example, Jonas with the substance designer tutorials, and Daniel Tiger as well. Like seeing the amount of artists who have just like gone on this roller coaster of just shot up in quality for their substance work, and you know who it's down to. It's down to these guys willing to put that content
oh
out.
yeah, like
And I've seen
pillars
some
of the
great.
community.
I did some great like trailers. Like people who are practicing their cinematic skills and their lighting and their engine work, and they're using Decagon assets. And I'm like, that's really cool to see. It's like there's parts of the industry which before probably weren't as accessible. So if you wanted to be a cinematic designer, it might have been a bit more difficult, 5-6 years ago, because you had to source a lot of artwork if you wanted to just focus on the cinematic side of it. But now you've got these Decagon assets. It's like I can make whole environments very quickly, and then I can just focus on lighting or on a cinematic design.
Exactly. Like so say I wanted to be a level designer or a lighting artist. um what I would do if I was starting from like zero, nothing, like I wouldn't actually even worry about making assets
Yeah,
because that's not relevant to the job. Like a lot of people I find, they feel like they have to do everything themselves and it really slows them down. So like if you want to be a lighting artist, buy pre-made environment packs for like, I don't know, $50 to $100. To some people that's like, oh my god, spending $100. It's like, okay, how
it's
long is it going to take you to make an environment
yeah.
by yourself?
How much is your time
Hundreds of hours.
worth? Yeah,
$1 an hour. So like, and there's a bunch of free stuff out there. You can relight people's scenes, and it's not cheating. Like if you want to become a level artist, so someone like a world builder where you're not actually building environment assets, go use a bunch of Megascans content and make a dope scene with that, right? Like show that you have composition and layout skills, because that's what employers are actually need to look for, is like find the key relevant job skills and just show that you mastered those.
Yeah.
Like don't if you want to be a lighting artist, or yeah, let's say you want to be a lighting artist, don't waste your time going and ZBrushing a bunch of assets, texturing them. It's taking away time from the one skill you actually enjoy doing, is lighting,
You know
right?
what?
Like you can I'm not saying don't do it. If you enjoy it, do it for sure. But if your goal is like, I want to become a super good lighting artist, get a job as a lighting artist, but I'm starting from zero, collab with other if you're in school, collab with other students. Like
Yeah.
someone wants to be a level designer, someone wants to be a texture artist, someone wants to be a environment artist. Cool. There's three people. Get together and say, okay, you do a gray box level design for us to art up, and I'll light it, and he can make the textures for the world. The end result's probably gonna be a lot better, and you're also gonna get a little bit of like that production environment feeling too, right?
Yeah. I mean, to be fair,
Separating it from
there's a
each
guy I
other.
follow, Harley Wilson, and it's really cool because I saw early on, um, he took like the Unreal, the original PBR Unreal test scenes they gave out back when Unreal 3 first came out. Sorry, Unreal 4 came out, and I've seen him take them and relight them, and I mean, you could tell a lighting artist has just gone over and made that look sharp as fuck.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I'm like, and I've seen his work like just go from being these relights of scenes to I mean, there's a lot of his shots. He's made projects where there's no like next to no actual you know level design. It's all about the lighting, and he's just carved this niche of just being this really shit.
His portfolio is phenomenal.
I love it. I
I
think
mean,
it's fascinating as well. Like, 'cause I look at it and I'm like, it's a grey block room with nothing but lights. Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating to look at.
he's just a badass artist in general, because I mean, he's
Yeah,
like he does everything, and I think
yeah.
that's
It's scary.
because he's probably so senior. Oh, I mean, it's oh wow, that guy's amazing. I'll never get there, but I think because he has so much experience and showcase that massive skill set, if as versus a student that doesn't have that of experience, probably sitting down to try and do it all is a lot more intimidating and harder, right?
I was saying there's a really good question here in the chat aimed at you. Fancy answering some questions?
Absolutely. I mean, that's everyone
Is
can see my my canned responses and stuff in video on YouTube. So like live questions, that's probably going to be the most value to the people tuning in. So let's do it.
someone's asked? I'm kind of considering being a generalist 3D. I'm not sure where I want to focus yet. So is it okay for me to do everything on my own? So when you're not sure where you want to focus yet, like what would be your advice? So
I would,
just to put some
yeah, I
context to
would
it.
absolutely go the. I like to refer to school, or the beginning phases of being a self-taught artist as just taste everything. Like your work's not going to be good enough to get you a job anyways. So if you're starting as a generalist, do you like making cars? Do you like making characters? Figure out what you enjoy doing, and then go all in on that. So like there, I think everyone does have to go through that generalist phase, but you
Yeah.
don't want your portfolio that you're applying to studios and stuff like that to be a generalist portfolio. Like by the time you've kind of buckled down and said, okay, I want to be an environment artist, your portfolio should be entirely environments. But
Yes.
when you're first learning, yeah, taste everything, because you never know, you're going to come across something like, oh, maybe you like suddenly you discover you really enjoy doing effects work, and you're like, oh, there's a big niche for that. Like studios are always looking for a good effects artist. There's a big little insider tip, is like, if you can become good at effects and you actually
You're
enjoy
in.
it, uh yeah, just go all in on that. But like if you enjoy being character artist, start making characters all the time. But like you're gonna have to sample everything in the beginning anyways. So yeah, just figure out what you enjoy doing, and then kind of as the further along you go in your career, you'll probably like niche down, and then in your free time on your personal projects, you'll probably start to broaden up. Like someone like Harley, like he probably does either environments or lighting at work, and then he'll go home and he'll do props and stuff. But that's because he's there, right? So there is that extra breadth that he can add to, like, I just want the creative satisfaction of making a car, even though I'm an environment artist or something like that, right? So but if you're going from student to getting into the industry, figure out what you want to do, and then niche down and just go hard on that for sure.
Just to take that a step further, take the question a step further. Do you think is there any sort of like any software you think which are just, you know what, if you're starting out and you're a generalist, at least pick up these, say, 1, 2, 3 bits of kit and learn them, because it doesn't matter what you do, you're probably going to need to know them. So is there any software
Uh,
you think you'd recommend to him to say, you know what,
Max,
definitely try
Max,
these?
Max or Maya. Most game studios use one of those, and I know there's a huge Blender community out there. I have never really seen it used in game studios. I mean, it's free, but you can also nowadays get a free educational license of Max. Um, so I would say probably go for Max or Maya. Use educational licenses. Like you want to be setting yourself up to remove or tick off things that the people game studio interview are they're going to ask you. Oh, are you familiar with 3D Studio Max? Are you familiar? Yeah, depending on the studio, right? So I mean, if that's just another tick box you can check off, yep, I've been using Max for 5 years or whatever, blah blah blah. That's just another question about your ability to do your job removed. So I would say, yeah, industry standard software.
For a ZBrushing with that as well.
Yeah, ZBrush, depending on what you're going to do. Again, relevancy, right? Like if you want to be a lighting artist, probably don't need to dabble in
True,
ZBrush that
yeah,
much.
yeah.
I would say, use Unreal or Unity to put, or I guess Marmoset too, to showcase your final your work. You want to be putting, if you want to work in games, you want to be showing your work in real time. Yeah, there's not really an excuse not to. Like Unreal is free. I think Unity is free.
Yeah,
Want to
no, I
be
think,
a
yeah.
proper character artist, show your work in Marmoset. If you want to be an environment artist, I would say go for a game engine like Unreal. Just there is more to the pipeline. You have to learn how to make materials and apply them to your meshes and stuff like that. How to construct a level and with lighting and all that stuff like. But yeah, just look at what's relevant to the position that you want to be. Yeah, but industry standard, I'd say Max or Maya. Have a studio that you want to work at, like in the future. Maybe do some research. Like I think Naughty Dog and Sony Santa Monica, they're heavy Maya studios. Ubisoft, they use a lot of Max. So if you're starting from square one, maybe go for where you want to work at. I mean, I think the biggest thing is learning the actual skill set. So I mean, there is no harm in using Blender to learn how to model or do 3D work. Like when to chamfer something or how the edge loops of a face work. That's universal, right? And then a lot of game studio interviews, they always ask me like, "Oh, we're a Maya studio, but I see you here you use Max." And at this point, my answer is usually, "Well, they're just tools on the belt, right? Like the core
Yeah,
skill
yeah.
set of topology, of modeling, of UVing. Like, yeah, the button placement changes, but the core skills of knowing, you know, how high poly something should be, or how to unwrap something efficiently, that's universal." Um, yeah, Max Maya, whatever it is you want to use, I would say those two are probably hitters. Nowadays, almost like material is are done in Substance Designer, Substance Painter. In a PPR workflow, you're probably shooting yourself in the foot. So I mean, the Substance suite is huge. The Quixel suite with like Megascans or Mixer, popular.
I have to
I
admit,
mean,
the substance stuff, like, for me, like, I did all the modeling stuff. I love to model assets in Max. I love the high poly, ZBrush and Painter. And to be fair, Substance Designer I parked a couple of times. I did get into it, but one thing it did do is, for me, who's someone who isn't sort of what you say officially educated, um, you wing a lot of stuff. It wasn't until I got into Substance Designer where it's like you can't use it if you don't understand materials, and almost some software I think like that does almost strong arm you into, you need to be educated and learn this software, and it educates you in principles, if that makes sense. Because then when I went to Unreal
yeah,
Engine, it
sitting down,
fixed a
like
bunch of my stuff.
learning how to. Yeah, exactly. You can kind of dabble around. I mean, yeah, for me, actually, one of my biggest weaknesses, to be honest, is Substance Designer. Like I use it a little bit here and there, but I haven't picked it up in say probably 6 months. So
Yeah.
that is kind of like one of the next things I really want to buckle down and really learn. Like I do find it does hold me back to a certain point, but I also really enjoy doing the workflow of like high poly trim sheet or a high poly ZBrush sculpt, and then do all my tiling materials in Painter on top of a high poly base. It's not an efficient workflow compared to like what you can do in Designer in the same time frame, but if I am doing those kind of things, say for a personal project, I'd rather be working in a workflow that I enjoy and can feel more creative in. A lot of people's personalities, right? Some people I find are super super logical and designer just clicks, and some people are like, oh man, all these nodes, it's super crazy. I'd rather do something in Painter or something that's a bit more, actual strokes and stuff like that. So
Organic, like.
yeah, but so for me, it's like, yeah, it's on the docket of to do. But I find also as the more senior I become, the more I'm actually stepping away from individual action and more focused on big picture stuff. So
Yeah.
in my day job, like I'm more focused on, oh, is the lighting good? Is the overall level construction going well? Are the JIRAs made to actually track asset production?
Oh, Jiras.
Am I
Oh.
mentoring people? Am I in meetings giving feedback? Am I providing thoughts and ideas on the overall production? So it's more of like I'm more of the macro, not the micro these days.
Do you prefer that?
But like
Do you say you
I
prefer
do,
that, go from the granular
yeah, yeah.
going up to the macro?
Personally, I don't really give a shit if the bolts on something are the leaks on that bolt just perfect. Like I don't envision myself spending a lot of my time doing that. I'd rather look at the whole overall scene.
Yeah.
And I think that was like, if you look at my Art Station Challenge scene, that is kind of like that's where it shines, is the macro, like the big picture. If you look at individual assets like, oh, the grass or whatever, like it breaks down a bit.
Yeah.
But that's how I think part of the reason why the scene turned out the way it did is because I focused on my strengths, and what I actually enjoy is the macro. And I think a lot of juniors, they do get really like focused on, are the bolts on this, are they individually rotated 15 degrees differently from each other? Because like when a player walks up to this wall and looks at it, footage of people playing Call of Duty, they're like sprinting it around, blasting guns,
Yeah.
and like, do you remember the color of that trash can in the corner
Yeah.
there? It's like, oh hell no. So I mean, that's a big skill actually. A lot of uh, artists or like students can learn is focus on the bigger picture as much as you can, because like the small details, they do make up the big picture, but don't get investing like 80% of your time in like streaks of grime when the overall 90% of the environment isn't fleshed out. It's just
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a recipe for working overtime.
Yeah. Yeah. I suppose it's all about time saving. Is there
It's like
any?
this one portion of this alley is perfect, but oh, the actual like three more blocks of the environment have to be done by next week. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
It's like,
Exactly. Is there actually, speaking of that? Since we're talking about time, have you put much thought into Houdini, or like any thoughts on Houdini? Excited by it? Think it might make
I'm
it into pipelines of like
I'm not
proper production?
super familiar with it. Like, I'll just be straight up. Like, I'm not super familiar with it. I know it's becoming more and more popular as like a niche software that, like, if you're good at Houdini, there's usually a spot for you at certain studios. It's like a really high end skill set that I think a lot of people I've talked to, like, it's really alien and hard to learn, but once you learn it, you become super valuable. So that
Yeah.
would be my thoughts on it. Is like anyone looking to become a studio could probably invest some time, if it's being, it's, I see it more and more on postmortems or breakdowns, like, oh, we used Houdini, like Spider-Man, their GDC talks, they're like, oh, we used Houdini to lay out the city and like build our buildings for us in like a fraction of the time. So I mean, there was probably one or two people that were really good at Houdini at the studio, that gave everyone a bunch of time. So like that person, you look at them in production, they're like a hero, right? So
This,
definitely a valuable software.
I think it might have been like kind of like what Substance Designer was. Like,
Same thing.
it's like
It's
that
like,
niche thing, which people are like, this is so
yeah,
powerful.
like same with like not everyone knows how to use it, but those that do can make really badass like sci-fi cloth panels and stuff like that. So I mean, it's only adding another tool to your tool belt.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, as a student, it's so easy to get overwhelmed and like, oh, I have
Yeah.
to learn this, I have to learn this, I have to learn this. It's like learn one or two things until you can produce like a really decent end result with like two or three softwares. Like you don't even have to use ZBrush if you can just hard surface model something. Like,
Yeah.
why are you focusing on learning
Dude,
ZBrush, right?
it was crazy. So I did a talk at a college, a bunch of 16, 17-year-olds. And so I was just talking about like sort of design flow and industry and all this sort of stuff. And then it's like Q&A, and they were like, yeah, so could you talk us through like what software you use? And I was like, it's not really like, I wouldn't be worrying about right now. Like they haven't even touched Max at this point. And they're like, oh yeah, so what about, I've heard of this thing called Houdini. I saw a YouTube video, or I saw this thing called Substance Designer. and I'm like,
That's a
you,
classic beginner mistake is be like,
yeah,
"Oh, there's so much out there, I have to try it all," and it's like, you're just gonna be really good at opening and closing software and getting frustrated. So, like,
yeah.
focus on 1 or 2 softwares and then, like, kinda branch out, 'cause
Well,
a
you
a
can't even
lot of people
explain
think
it. You can't even explain it to someone because if they go, "Oh yes, what's the substance design?" I'm like, I kind of you. They don't know what a vertex is at that point, so you're like,
start small and just, like, master, "Okay, here's how you make a teapot in Max," like, "Here's how you navigate a viewport," and then just kinda build on it. But, I mean, a lot of people think that it's the software that makes you a good artist or a computer. Like, someone on one of my YouTube videos was their comment was, "Your computer specifications, please." As if, like, that's what helped me make this scene in Unreal or something like that, and I'm
yeah,
like I was actually kinda happy because I was like, "Oh, my computer's a piece of shit." It's like
yeah.
5, 6 years old. It's like 16 gigs of RAM, like, not a very good video card. It's like your skills you've developed as an artist over time will be what find a lot of beginners, they'll be like, look at someone's awesome artwork and be like, "Oh, man, they must have a dope video card."
Yeah. It's just
And
like nah. No, we just have really long
I'm
render
I'm gonna
times.
if I spend $4,000 and get like a quadro or something like that. I remember there's a thread on Polycount where someone was just like, "I'm gonna spend $5,000 on a PC," but they were like making stick figures. Oh, buddy, man, like first
But
of all, like that video card, if your end result is gonna be in Unreal, like you don't need that video card.
invest in RAM,
Like
bro.
just a huge mistake. Yeah, invest in like an okay computer and then invest your time, time and consistency. Like yeah, it's software and a really baller computer will only get you so far. So it's just slowly mastering a wide variety of skills. Like learn about composition, learn about the slight technical side of things. Oh, here's how you do vertex blending. Like add that onto your plate later on after you learn how to UV map something. So it's just step by step by step. And don't get overwhelmed by you know the latest and greatest software, right? Like after Quixel's last video, I'm sure a bunch of people are like, oh my god, I'm gonna learn Mixer, but they don't know how to model or a piece of terrain or something
Yeah,
like that.
exactly. I mean, to be fair, you got Alchemist coming out soon, which I'm assuming is going to be quite similar to Mixer as well.
I mean, it looks amazing, right? So even me, I saw that. I was like, oh, that looks great. I'm like, nah, I'll probably learn it at some point, but it's not the top of my to-do list because like I'm
Yeah,
right now my focus is on creating tutorials and entry level content, and it looks dope. Like I'm sure I sent a tweet to like Josh Lynch and be like, yo, did you see this? I'm sure it's gonna make your life like super amazing. Uh, but it's not super relevant to what I'm doing, right? So it's in the background, and I'm like, it would be nice to know, but I'm not sitting there thinking that my career is going to be
no, no. Well, you've
hamstrung by some software, right?
yeah. I know exactly what you mean. There's another interesting question here. I'm not sure how much you either can or want to comment on it. But
Go
your
ahead.
sort of your general thoughts on the sort of quote crunch time when it comes to working in a studio. Is spoken about a lot in the industry. Obviously, a lot of the time it's like it's this super stressful thing. Is it something you have experienced yourself, and it is as bad as what some people can make out, or is this something that's maybe a bit of
Yes,
exaggerated?
and oh yeah, for sure. Okay, okay, yeah, let's unpack this. So like when I first started working in the industry, it was at a smaller studio and for a junior salary, and there's the fear of like, oh, I have to really perform, I have to get stuff done. So there was quite a bit of crunch. Part of it was the project, part of it was my own workflow, probably. So in that case, yeah, I mean, I worked a bunch of crunch at the beginning of my career, and as I've progressed, I've just kind of stopped doing it. And some people would probably be like, "Oh, he's not, supporting the team and stuff." But like, my whole motto is work to live, not live to work, right? So, I mean, the thoughts on it are like, say it's bad management's fault, it's probably going to create a negative work environment, and mandatory crunch is probably never a good thing. Sometimes it might even nowadays, like if I'm behind on something and it's my own fault because I've been dicking around and not focused on what I was doing, like yeah, I'll put in the extra couple hours. I'm not going to sit there and do like 15 hours of overtime.
Yeah,
But if it's just yeah, my own accountability. Is this my fault? Is this horrible production planning? Ubisoft was really good with their work life balance. Like I was never asked to stay late once. Like they would have the overtime meals and stuff for people that wanted to work and stay late. But like to be honest, like some people on your team will probably give you the stink eye if you're leaving at you've done your 8 hours and you're walking like, well, see you tomorrow, guys. But I don't know.
Do people do
It's
that? Do you think you get the dirty looks
there's
when
this
you?
like dirty looks thing that people talk about online, but I'm like, man, if you think me not staying late is having a negative impact on your life, like, come on, man, like, go home to your family. But then there's the people that are generally super passionate and they would work 12-hour days if they could anyways, right?
I
So
mean, to be fair, that is me. I have to admit, I am the guy that I literally finish work, get home from work, have some food, walk the dog, sit back down, right back to work. Like just because it is something I enjoy.
exactly, and there's nothing wrong with that. I
But
mean,
I don't
that
then
comes down
judge
to
the other guy.
self-awareness, right?
Yeah, yeah. But you
So
don't judge the other
so
guy for saying, "Oh, I don't." Like you said, you live to work, not work to live.
and
If
I mean,
that's your
like,
bag,
yeah,
that's like, yeah, that's your life. That's if that's what you want to do. It's like there shouldn't really be. I'm surprised that gets spoken about the judgment side of it. I didn't realize that got spoken about
it
so
comes up
much.
on like industry forums all the time of people being like, "Oh yeah," I mean, and the people that are going to view you as like a negative asset to the studio just because you went home to see your family or something like
Went
that.
home on
Like,
time.
do you even want to work there? Like,
Yeah.
if to be honest, and that's why to go like full circle, man, like building an audience and the following on ArtStation, a new opportunity to go somewhere else if you don't enjoy what you're doing. If you're mandatory crunch, like a lot of people that aren't doing that kind of stuff, it might feel like I have no out. Like I can't quit my job. I can't go get a new job because I haven't updated my portfolio in a year or something like that. So they feel like stuck, which is a horrible feeling to feel, right? Like, yeah, it's a touchy subject. I mean, at the same time, if I was working on a project and I knew there was going to be a massive bonus at the end of it, and they're like, oh, it's a 2 week push for the E3 demo that's going to help us sell like an extra, a million units, and oh, okay, that's going to be an extra, 20, 30 grand in my pocket at the end of the book. Hell yeah, I'll
Yeah,
I'll do the
exactly.
extra
Yeah,
elbow
yeah,
grease.
yeah.
If there's, it's if it's unpaid and it's just a nosedive of a project, you can see, there will be some payoff, like, then I don't know, maybe I'll do a couple weeks of extra push for the potential of a dope bonus. Like, it's a wash in the end, right? Like, especially nowadays, you see articles popping up on Kotaku. Oh, this studio is a terrible place to work. Well, now they're gonna have a hard time attracting talent, right? It's just
Especially with our station now, where talent's so
polluted mess,
visible.
man.
Like, I don't know whether it is because of our station, but like the community itself is quite like, obviously you got friend, like I said, you speak to people like Josh Lynch, and there's the whole Discord communities where there's people from different studios who know each other as, on a friendly level. You mistreat your staff, man. Like, it's very easy to go, hey, I know this guy at this studio who says it's dope to work
But yeah,
there. Like,
like
you have to look after
the
your staff
culture,
now.
yeah, the culture and the vibe of a studio, like, Montreal's a big hub. You can kind of ask around and get the vibe of a place long before you interview there. Hey, is this place good place to work? Well, no, they don't really know what they're doing. Or like, oh yeah, this place is dope. They have like a really good culture, and so like the word on the street is always there. And that's why like going to networking things or just getting involved in the community is only a plus, right? Like, you're gonna have probably the word on the street about the vibe of a studio. You're gonna get the word on the street about potential jobs, because a lot of times people in studios will and their network long before a job is even posted.
Yeah.
So so half the time a studio's hiring, like, they'll fill spots before even posting the job.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's another benefit of getting involved in the community too, right? So
Big bit of
yeah,
advice I would say
long
to
story
people doing
short,
that.
the thoughts on crunch: do it if you want to. Have the self awareness to say no when you got to walk away, and if it's a horrible, poisonous environment, just create opportunity for yourself and leave.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think, to be fair, like that's a big bit of advice I give like to anyone whenever in interviews. Is like what you said. Ask the staff who are there. Like, even if you're with the managers and stuff, you'll gauge their reaction. Like, if it is a horrible place. So, I'm not going to name names. The studio was at a while back, and people come around and it's like, "What's it like to work here?" And you see people go, yeah, it's all right." And it's like, that is a bad sign. If they're not going, "Yeah, this is a really good place to work. This is all this, that, and the other," and they're having to go, and you sort of
yeah,
going, "Okay, this is
exactly.
probably
Like
that
I've
says
had
a
enough
lot."
like interviews and walkarounds at studios these days, or like nowadays, over the course of my career, that you can kind of get a general vibe of the place. Like, hey, do you want to take the tour? Absolutely.
Yes,
Just like,
100%. You go and talk
yeah,
to people, dude.
uh,
I tell you
yeah. I
what,
mean, and you also don't want to build that opportunity for managers to start crunch for granted as like that's just part of production and scheduling that way. So I mean, that is another
yeah,
downside of doing it. So
Oh,
It's a
that's
complicated topic.
yeah, it is. It's quite. It's one of these things. It's like almost taboo. Um, but I'm glad you said that. I'm really glad you said that because I do think that, like I said, it's probably more for people newer to the industry, but they feel as
Yeah.
if I've got to crunch, I've got to crunch, and make themselves miserable. I mean, I'm guessing because you have that balance, does work ever feel like work for you, or is it?
I mean, absolutely. Like every single production I've worked on, there's always like probably a period of time where I'm like, oh man, this I don't see this thing coming together. Oh, it's like I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Man, I'm just kind of tired of working on it. But then like it's like the ups and downs, right? I mean, if you it's I'm sure like actors going into work every day on set isn't a cakewalk, right? Like some days it does feel like work and you go there and you try and get as much done as possible. And then um the studio that I'm at now too, like every week at the end of the week we have a show and tell, and that's actually a great thing to you can get so like focused in and honed in on what you're doing that you fail to see the big picture. So even at Ubisoft, anytime they would have like a show stuff from the game that you're working on that you don't even realize is in there, that's great for getting like your motivation and your energy level of the whole team back up, right? Because people see all these, like I see stuff from the animators, I'm like, oh man, that looks sick. Like, oh, there's here's a fly through of some environment I didn't even know that was being made. So I mean, that's part of company culture when it comes down to it, is finding ways to care of the big picture. Because I mean, if you're modeling rocks and or like cars or bumpers or hands all day, it's easy to get so lost in the weeds. You lose track side and like you lose track of the fact that you're actually making a game, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh, to go into work and think that every day is going to be amazing and exciting and like, oh, nerf fights are going to be breaking out, like a lot of those like behind the scenes videos, it's like, oh come on. Like sometimes it is you're I consider myself a production artist, and there's two words, right? Like production and artist. So sometimes I get to be super creative, sometimes I'm working on stuff that I don't actually want to be
Yeah,
making.
yeah.
You just do your best with it. At the end of the day, you're being paid to make you know art in a for a video game, so you're not like lifting boulders on a construction site, so it's not that bad.
I think that is a great bit of perspective because I tell you what, I don't think I could ever go back to being a brookie. I
Oh
think
man, it's yeah. I do consider myself like quite spoiled when it comes to that kind of stuff. Where it's like, man, I don't want to go like if I was to get like laid off or something like that, I wouldn't really consider you know going and getting like a manual labor job or whatever. I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna find a new way to use my skill set.
yeah, yeah. Do you just to
Studio,
sort
right?
of wrap up on this? There's one last question I want to get round to, and you've been around in the industry for a long time, man. Like you've been through transitions in consoles, you've been through different generations of consoles. Have you ever considered different creative industries, so like film or TV, anything like that? Have you ever considered that, or are you just like really just enjoying the roller coaster you're on now within games? Have you ever considered
Uh,
anything else?
yeah, I mean, like to go back to where we was doing like that 3D printing stuff. We were doing like different various animations and stuff for commercials and stuff like that. So I was always like side of things, but at this point in my career, I've built such a honed skill set for what I am doing in games that I think, like I said, I'm playing to my strengths. Consider transitioning to film for something like, I don't know, like lighting or something like that, like maybe, but I just enjoy the work in games. I find it
Yeah,
super creative, and you get to make super cool fantastical stuff. So it's what I'm happy doing. But yeah, no, never really considered stepping out. Maybe like like stepping to the side and like going to like VR or something like that could be cool. Like emerging kind of like factions of like the game industry. So like VR is like this new thing still, even nowadays, like it's new, right? Like it's not a huge segment of the industry, but like eventually it will be. I think it's going to be absolutely massive. But so I mean, it's just taking that applicable skill set and transitioning, yeah, for sure. But I mean, if you're like for me, I'm just enjoying what I'm doing. So, and I'm kind of using that skill set now as on the side hustle thing with the like Polygon Academy of
yeah.
that's like if I'm gonna put my energy into something else, it'd probably be like my own business, or different side of things.
It's so cool seeing that this. You seeing you guys like yourself, Josh, Dynasty, seeing you guys do that. That's like you said, you call it a side hustle sort of thing. Like it's the fact that it's a side hustle, but at the same time, it's so much giving back that it's so cool to see, and it's
Yeah,
I hope more people like you do
like
it.
I'm totally like I'm I think in most of my videos I've been pretty upfront about like what I'm doing with Polygon Academy is like I'm gonna do that like whole Gary V's jab 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 right hook. So I mean a ton of free content, and then every now and then maybe like 2-3 times a year the goal is to make like a super premium course. So I mean like just to I don't want the people to have the impression that it's all for free and it's amazing. It's you're just doing it for like there is like it is going to be a business, but I mean at
Yeah.
the same time if I can give back, I think that's only going to build a loyal fan base which will help grow the business, right? So I mean, it's win-win in that sense, where it's like I want 90% of people like they probably would never have to give me a dime, and but the niche premium products will probably keep the business afloat.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where that's going. But it's you get the opportunity to actually create a business. To like if I sat down and just started making paid tutorials right out the gate, and like I think a lot of people sometimes they'll make like a tutorial, put it up on Gumroad, won't make very much money for versus the time invested because
Mm.
they're putting like the cart before the horse, right? Whereas
Yeah.
if they had put a bunch of free content out, I know it seems counterintuitive. It's like free content. I want to be charging. I want to be making money.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
yeah, but by building that quality like fan base, when you put something out finally that's paid, they'll probably be eager to buy it. So you'll have like a big launch versus like 1 or 2 or 3 sales and you're like, man, I spent 100 hours making this tutorial and I made like $100. Like this is the disconnect, right? It's like you
Yeah.
got to
Yeah.
understand the marketing side of things. So it's I'm happy to keep creating free content because I know it'll help me in the long run, and it's going to help other people more importantly too, right? So
That's class, man. Right, dude, we've been talking for like an hour 16. I can't believe it's this gone by. I said this last week as well, but
bye.
it goes by way quicker than I wanted to. So you could literally, I reckon we could talk for like another 2 hours quite easily. I mean, I've got to get you on again. I'm going to say this probably every single week. I definitely got to get you on again because there's some subjects where I reckon we can unpack a lot more and really get into. I mean, I'm guessing you'll be up for that at some point in the future.
Absolutely, man. Like we could, yeah, set something up in the future. Maybe after there's like, I probably built more free content and stuff like that, and we can maybe do a sit down and do a massive like Q&A session. Like I definitely love answering people's questions. Like
Yeah,
when you said the questions were coming in, that was probably where people are gonna get the most value out of it because it's interactive. So
I think
definitely
we
like
might do that.
schedule a huge block of time for that for sure.
Yeah, we'll write that in so we can get it. So we get loads of questions in. We can use Discord. Jeremy's Discord's incredible for that. There's loads of people in there who I'm sure have a
Do
million
you want to
questions
do
for you.
one final question for anyone watching it? Like give them opportunity to.
I think there's one last one. I think there's one I've missed. Where is it? Once. So speaking of manual labour jobs, if you're in a position where you're in the late 20s and you live in a country with almost no opportunities and your work isn't superstar level yet, any advice? So a nice easy one to finish on.
My advice: just get as good as possible. And yeah, I mean, look for any local opportunities. Like Game Dev Map is great for that. There might be actual studios in your country that you didn't even know about. So maybe take a look on there. But yeah, just get as good as possible, and that'll probably be your out. Like I know a lot of people from like me being or like Eastern Europe, they'll be like, "There's no studios here." I'm like, just your work isn't amazing. Get it to be amazing, and people will be hitting you up to get a
Yeah,
job, and that'll be your out. And don't be afraid to move. Like moving internationally, if you get a good offer, is a great experience. Like I love to travel. Don't be afraid of relocating, especially if you're young in your 20s. You probably don't have like a wife and kids or anything like that, and you have that freedom to pick up and travel around the world. I would do it in like a heartbeat, especially if I was back in my 20s. That was one of my regrets is not traveling as much. Paid to relocate somewhere, and you get to do what you're passionate about. Do it, but yeah, just get really good, and people will start hitting you up with job offers.
you have to put it on your like a tag. Just get good.
Yeah,
That's the
just
tagline.
just become like an art gangster. Like you want
Yes.
people blowing up your LinkedIn. When you start getting private messages in ArtStation and LinkedIn, saying, "Hey, like we're looking for people," like that's when you know that your portfolio is good enough.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
instead
And
of instead of you approaching people
yeah,
approaching you, that's a good sign.
that's bang. I can't agree more with that. Right, we're gonna have to wrap up. I just want to let everyone say, firstly, thank you for all the guys who tuned in and watched and asked questions. It's been great having you guys in the chat. I want to give everyone a heads up for next week. We've got Jeremy Estrelado on, aka Dynasty, so we're gonna get him on finally. Tim, dude, you've been a pleasure to talk to. It's been super easy talking to you, and like I said, we could talk for another 2 hours without breaking a sweat, I reckon. So we'll get you on, and I think next time I agree with you, I'd love to get a much longer list of Q&A, and we can spend the whole session just going through them and answering people's questions and talking on it.
Keep me on my toes.
Exactly. Right, so guys, thank you very much, and I'll see you next week.